Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for sharing part of your evening with us tonight. We are pleased you're here for this very special program. I am Ria Combs, Supervisory Curator of Photography and Film and Director of the Earl W. and Amanda Stafford Center for African American Media Arts at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Tonight, we are in for a treat. We have artists Zora Lathan and Iman Ukda Hameen and their films dedicated to the interiority of Black life. This is part of Viewfinder, Women's Film and Video from the Smithsonian, a year-long virtual screening and conversation series featuring an array of moving image works by women across Smithsonian collections, and generously sponsored by the Smithsonian American Women's History Initiative. This initial phase of the series focuses on the idea of interiority, understood physically, psychologically, or otherwise. A particularly resonant theme during this time where we're experiencing a global pandemic. Each virtual program of the series occurs on the first Thursday of every month. Next month's program is Chitra Ganesh on Dreaming and Refusal, Thursday, June 3rd at 5:30 p.m. For more information about upcoming events in the series, please visit womenshistory.si.edu. While viewing this evening's program on Zoom, we recommend that you select Gallery, Active Speaker, or Thumbnail View on the top right corner of your screen in order to better see our panelists and the presentation. We have live closed captioning available, which can be accessed along the bottom menu, as can the Q&A function, where we welcome you to submit questions as you think of them, and they will be answered during the second half of the program. I am also particularly excited that you've joined us for this special screening of 5 of Lathan's short experimental works, which total about 15 minutes, and the 20-minute film Unspoken Conversations, the 1987 work by Ms. Hameen. The museum's audio-visual collection is dedicated to preserving and collecting works that are known and many that are lesser known, but that capture the indelible creativity and ingenuity of African American artists and address important topics germane to African American history and culture. We also recognize how important it is to showcase works because they are part of a long-standing artistic practice, but for a variety of reasons, many of these works have not been seen by larger audiences. So the works of Ms. Lathan were initially brought to our attention and have come to the museum through one of our hallmark initiatives, the Great Migration Home Movie Project, which is a free program to our visitors that digitizes analog film formats. Lathan arrived at the museum with her experimental films in tow that she created nearly 50 years ago while a film student in Chicago. We were really taken aback by these works because they offer a refreshing take on Black life and the quotidian aspects of urban African-American middle and working class experiences, which frankly presents a different narrative than expressed in many mainstream media presentations of the time period. For instance, her work neither focused on the plights of poverty or sort of utilized many of the Blaxploitation tropes that were very popular in Hollywood at the time. It's also important to note that both Ms. Lathan and Ms. Hameen's work focus on the female gaze taking center stage, which we also thought was particularly resonant. In speaking of Ms. Hameen's work, we were introduced to her material as we were processing one of our largest film collections at the museum, the Pearl Bowser film collection. Ms. Hamid's work is timeless in that it is an insightful take on the very interior realities of womanhood and the constant tightrope one walks when trying to navigate partnerships, family, motherhood, and one's own personal creative pursuits. So without further ado, please join me for the screening of these works that I trust will spark curiosity and engagement. Immediately following the screenings of both Lathan and Hamid's films will be a post-screening conversation with the artist, moderated by my colleague, National Museum of African American History and Culture's Digital Preservation Specialist, Ms. Ina Archer. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Sound one, real one. This is Unspoken Conversation.
My name is Shanti, but for years I was called Ted's wife. My story isn't new, just untold, so I'm telling it now to the man whose music fills this room. These are the wives, and so-called wives, shattered by careless, therefore sometimes heartless men called musicians. Soar through the audience to the stage. I tap you on the shoulder. You are oblivious to my presence. I see myself dressed in black as if in mourning. Mourning my semblance of life, perhaps. I get carried away with the music. It haunts me, mocks me, laughs at me. I laugh too. This is no laughing matter. You're magnificent, talented. I move to your talent, your beat. My classes start September 6th. I'm going back to college.
And you didn't tell me? Well, who's going to watch the children?
They'll be in school all day.
Well, what about half days and school holidays?
I'll take them with me to class if I have to.
If that phone rings for a gig, I have to be able to go. And if I sit home and babysit, we lose money.
I can get a decent job with a degree, one worth going to every day, and then it won't be so hard on you.
I can manage. I am managing.
We can't keep living like this.
Like what? You're not starving.
It's not just the money.
You shouldn't have to work. I mean, you have enough to do already. Besides, you belong at home.
How can you tell me where I belong? I don't even know. At least give me the room to find out.
I'll give you all the room you need. Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Everything all right? Yeah. Take your coat off, man. Sure. Hey, how you doing, attorney? Yeah, man, let's get this rehearsal on here.
Film is an art. It's the art of making the ordinary extraordinary. However, you have to know the language and the technical aspects in order to make this an art form that you can use. You have to remember, in filmmaking, you're dealing with a visual art. When you transfer a script to film, you are showing your audience exactly what's going on in the writer's mind. So now, to make an indelible image on the viewer's mind, what would you do?
Nothing stays the same. Yeah.
My class is so exciting.
Why are you so late?
I'm not late.
The children are already home. They started their homework already.
Great.
Great. You should be here before the kids get home, not after.
Well, you were here, weren't you?
I'm all dressed up again. I'm a queen. Is this my throne? An old car? My crown, a drum on my head?
My bag's ready yet?
I'm almost finished. Here.
Thank you, son. I want you to watch Mom and your baby sister when I leave, okay? Okay, Rashida, Jesse, do what I told you. And Jesse, take care of your mama. Thank you. I'll see you when I get back to camp.
Ordinary, extraordinary.
Ordinary. Does it become extraordinary by the way I film it?
Now, an Inky has different intensity and quality than a Fresnel. And don't you forget it.
Yes, sir. Have you ever thought of teaching film?
Every day. Hey, you missed the announcement. Charles Burnett is coming next week.
Get out of here. You're kidding.
Hey, he's gonna show his film.
Let me see that. I don't believe it.
Wish I knew why I'm so in love with you. No one else in this world will do. Darling, please say
It's good to be home.
So how was it?
I hate being on the road.
Is your foot all right?
Hurts a little.
fool in love, I'd say, and pray you say you'll love me.
Honey, do you think you could watch the kids on Thursday? There's a lecture at school I really want to see, and I have
No, I'll have to call. Let everybody know I'm back in town.
I should be back by 10 o'clock.
Perhaps it does change the attitude and change the circumstance. Thanks a lot for calling. It's 8 minutes before the hour of 10 o'clock. We're going to take a brief break and be right back with more of you on the telephones coming up at 10 o'clock, a special 1-hour edition of The Mind's Eye.
What is it, Shanti? I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. What is it? I wouldn't ask if there was someone else. It's just that there just isn't anyone else to... Would you babysit for me on Thursday? I have an evening class and I can't miss it. It should be over by 10 and I'll make sure that they're dressed and fed and...
It's all right. Don't worry about it. I'll pick them up after work.
Thanks, Mom.
Finished? I have to get up.
No, sit back.
I have to iron a uniform.
I'll do it for you, Mom.
I really appreciate it.
After all you've been through, how can I cry to you?
Why did you try to kiss me the first day we met? When your mama wasn't looking, you moved over real close.
Stop it. I have to get this done.
Your mother called.
I can hear the phone.
She said she can't babysit Thursday. Patient died.
Oh, Mr. Rice.
Sure, she'll call you later. What's going on Thursday?
late class I told you about.
Well, there's only one class. It shouldn't matter much if you miss it.
It's the most important class so
Well,
far.
get somebody else to take it.
And look like a fool. People are taking off from work to be there.
Well, ask somebody else to babysit.
Who? Practically everyone I know has at least 3 children. Nobody babysits for 2 children. You should know that.
Well, you're the one that wanted to go back to school. Everything was fine until you decided you wanted to be a...
B, that's it. Exactly, B. So you decided to punish me for wanting something for myself. I'm a bad girl for wanting something for myself.
Because I won't sit at home to babysit, I'm punishing you? How can you be so selfish? Huh? I've had 3 gigs canceled already. Hey, what if George Bishop calls me for another gig and I can't go because I'm sitting at home babysitting? I mean, if I don't get a gig this week, how are we going to eat? I don't know what you wanted.
I don't think you ever knew. All you talk about is your music. What song you're writing. What gig you can get. What album you can cut. What did I wear yesterday? What's my favorite color? What's my favorite song?
This is ridiculous.
Oh, this is ridiculous, huh? Should I sing it for you then? Will it be ridiculous then?
I stood outside in the middle of winter selling stupid hats and gloves to bring extra money into this house so you can have what you wanted. On the coldest day of the century, I was outside selling so you wouldn't have to work. Well, what more do you want from me? I don't know what you want anymore. I think you need to grow up.
I don't know if I can go through with this much longer.
Yeah. You're trying, man. Well, thank you.
I'm glad I came. Keep it up, D. Play it often.
Yeah, as often as we can.
Okay. I'll be back to see you again.
Please tell the management you like it.
Yeah. Please do.
Well, here's to the music.
Oh, yeah. Shanti.
How do you manage with a family?
My children hate me. I don't blame them. I'm never at home. And my husband, ex-husband, never could understand how I could love and need something so much. Filmmaking has taught me more about myself than anything else. The very nature of film is exciting. Has a seductive mystique that's hard to define. It's tenacious, and it's unyielding, and it's my life. I'll see you next week.
So what was that all about? You don't want to, do you?
No.
Here. Come here. Sit right down here. Now look. If anything is bothering you, all you've got to do is tell me. We can talk about it. Now you are going to remember that now, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what time is the lecture? I used to keep my drums beside my bed, right by my head. So they'd be the last thing I saw at night, and the first thing I'd see in the morning. I would tune them to the day, shine them up, kiss them. It would take hours, but I was in heaven. Love is obsessive. When the doctor told me I had to have an operation on my foot, I thought that was the end of my drum playing days. I've been playing drums ever since I was 11. And this man was telling me no more. I had a wife, son, a newborn baby girl. I couldn't just lay on my back. I had to do something. Music is my life. How can you give up life when you're still living?
My story isn't new or untold, and I've told it to you, Ted, my husband.
Hello. Let's see when Iman gets here. Hello, Iman.
Hi. It won't start. My audio is here. But it keeps
Okay.
telling you-
So maybe we can get some
Oh my
Smithsonian backup.
Please. It's telling me that the recording hadn't stopped, so I couldn't get video. Now it's just telling me it's an alert.
Well, I think if they can work on that, I'll start and we'll hopefully get you in here soon. But as long as we can hear you for the time being. Okay. First of all, making the ordinary extraordinary. I get nervous doing these programs and all, and then after I watch these films, I just am so excited. So I'm really, really happy to be able to talk to our two filmmakers tonight. these joyful expressions through Zora's films and Iman's amazing economical yet packed filmmaking. So I'm going to do a little bit of a short, well, first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Ina Archer. I'm a media conservator and digitization specialist at the Museum of African American History and Culture. And I'm really so pleased to be able to share a conversation with these filmmakers and Q&A with the audience, both as a conservator and as an artist and video maker. So I'm going to start with very shortened bios from Zora and Iman, because both of them, of course, as mature artists, have very robust biographical sketches and resumes. Zora Lathan is a lifelong naturalist. She has a BA in photography and film design from the University of Illinois at Chicago and has taken a variety of graduate level environmental courses and has studied landscape design at the USDA Graduate School. Zora worked for the National Audubon Society from 1985 to 1987 as the director of community greening of the Community Greening Program and as the environmental media liaison to produce and distribute on national television, radio, and print media, public service announcements promoting waste reduction, reuse, and recycling. From 1997 to 2001, she produced and distributed national television and print PSAs on healthy eating practices for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. In 2002, Zora spearheaded the formation of the Chesapeake Ecology Center, the CEC. Although she's currently semi-retired, she has worked as the executive director of the environmental nonprofit since its inception. Zora has also provided technical assistance and designed and installed several conservation landscapes at various locations throughout Anne Arundel County, Maryland, including a rainscaping park, a living shoreline, and other conservation landscapes in Highland Beach, where she and her husband reside. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk with Zora in talking about her films and to connect that to her work as an environmental advocate.
It won't go off. It will not go.
I'll continue. So, and by the way, both of the complete biographies will be in the chat. So Iman Ukta Hameen, formerly Robin Roper, is a retired New York City public educator who is a Connecticut native and a longtime resident of the Bronx, New York. A Howard University pre-med attendee from 1970 through 72, class of 1970 graduate of James Hill House High School in New Haven, Connecticut, and holds master's degrees in early childhood elementary education and educational building administration and supervision with advanced certification in staff development, an undergraduate degree in film communications and video, and a minor in journalism from the School of Communications of City College, New York. Now, Hameen is a student of Kathleen Collins' Pretty Men, and we're going to come back to this part of her biography so she can speak to us more about her work and influences of and relationship to both Pearl Bowser and Kathleen Collins, the filmmaker of Losing Ground, that has been uncovered more recently or has been celebrated more recently. Hameen has held several positions in numerous film and video productions in every department, and most notably worked on feature films as a short-lived production assistant on Spike Lee's Jungle Fever, apprentice script supervisor for Ayoka Shinjira's Alma's Rainbow, and assistant producer to fellow film video technician and alumni, the late Joseph B. Vasquez of Hanging with the Homeboys fame. She's a graduate of the Video Technician Training Program at the Apollo Theater, certified by the City University of New York Business and Professional Development Institute. Hameen is an activist, community organizer, and coordinator of parades, conferences, and events. Currently, she spends her time traveling, writing, reading scripts, editing books, and revising curriculum for the Arts Education Homeschooling Network. There, and
there you are.
Perfect. Perfect entry. So as I said, the bios, bios are in the chat. And so let's jump in, because I imagine that people have lots of questions, and I'm excited to speak with you about the films. So as I was saying at the beginning, this, both of you have made the ordinary extraordinary, and there's so many different things that flew out at me, the relationships between mothers and daughters, having the chance and the room to do your practice as artists, learning how to work in art, just all of those things. So the first question I'd like to talk to you both about is your backgrounds and how you got involved with filmmaking and making these particular films. Let's see. So you both went to film school, but what made you kind of pick up a camera and get involved with that?
I first say thank you. Thank you for screening my film. It's quite a surprise. I'm just really overwhelmed. I haven't looked at the film in a while, so it points to Kathy, my professor, and the reason why I started film, I started writing more so than having an interest in film. And when I was young, I would just go to the library and just sit on Saturdays. That was my social time, just to go to the library while my mom was shopping. And I would just read and read. And I would also observe people. I didn't talk much. I still don't, but I didn't talk much. But what I did do was listen. And I realized that people don't listen. They talk and talk, and people don't listen to what they're saying. And so for me, I would write more than anything, and I didn't really share my writing. Just want to stay on point here. I didn't share my writing as much. So when I went to Howard, I was in pre-med. I didn't even think to pursue film or writing or anything. I would take courses. I took some creative writing courses, but I didn't think to study film. In fact, I didn't really think that it was a thing, because we're talking 30 some years ago. And when I was at Howard, Tony Brown had just started the School of Communications. And so I didn't even know what was available in that department. And again, I was more focused on following in my mom's footsteps. You saw in the film that I was with her when she was graduating. And yes, that's pretty much all me. It's pretty much all my life in that film, what I depicted. And I tell friends, be careful. I might write about you. I might make a movie about you.
There you go.
But having said that, I gotta just give so much respect to my husband for me being able to put this message out there and the story out there. But thanks to Kathy, she saw the story in me. And actually, before I even go further, I'd like to read what I wrote about this film. I was going to go back, but I'll go ahead and read it. But I was going to tell you the reason why I wrote this. I submitted my piece to AVA, because AVA has a directory of filmmakers, Black female filmmakers.
And so, yeah, and I just want to say, so when you say Kathy, you're talking about Kathleen Collins, the
yes,
filmmaker.
Yes. You know, I'm going to be all over the place because this is 32 years of time together, and I wanted to show you who I'll be talking about. And it's very emotional for me. I was not able to attend her funeral because I just couldn't go. But there was a tribute. Haile Gerima had a tribute for Kathy at Howard years later. She died in 88. I shouldn't say it's years later from now, but she died in 88, the year we all graduated. And
Oh,
she had given so much to us. And just to see her decline, it was difficult for me to attend the funeral. But I was trying to make it to her tribute. And her tribute was in December. She passed in September 1988, and her tribute was in December 88. And I had packed up the children. My husband was willing and ready to go, but it was a storm. It was such a snowstorm, and we were still trying to make it. It was a blizzard, and I wasn't able to go to her tribute. I want to hold her up just one more time.
And
Please.
I'd like to come back to her a little bit later on when we talk about the professor character in your film.
Yes,
But you were also referring to
Oh.
Ava, which is Ava DuVernay. And her kind of and your relationship to her.
Her chronicling Black African American filmmakers, 89 of them, and I'm not in it. So when I want something, I go after it. And so I contacted her in different ways. And I think my son was the one who said, put it on Vimeo also. And it turns out that he knows people who work with Ava, people who work under Mercedes Cooper, who was Ava's second in command or first in command. But she had a book. My goal was to be in it, so that, and to make my film aware to Ava. And so I was contacting her, and that's when I met Dennis Duros, but that's another story also. But I'm back to being surprised that you found me, and thankful that you found me, because through all of that, you didn't find me in those avenues. You found me, I think, on Vimeo. I'm not sure.
Well,
you found my film.
Well, as Ria was describing, and for both of you, your films came to us through two kind of foundational, unique initiatives at our museum. And so for you, it's the Pearl Bowser Collection, Pearl Bowser Collector, authority on African American early race cinema and cinema throughout the 70s, 80s. 90s. She's her collection is one of the foundational collections at the Museum of African American History and Culture. And she had a distribution company. So when we were scanning her films, your film was among those films, and probably what we were thinking is that they came through her distribution company.
She distributed my film, and I was so surprised about that. Pearl, how's she doing? It's been so long. She still has my film. And Black Filmmaker Foundation, Warrington Hudlin, they distributed my film also. But I want to get back to what I wanted to read to you about the film. And it speaks to interiority. And by the way, let me thank you for promoting interiority, because when you look at this word, you think, is that inferiority? And I'm glad that you're putting a different image to it. But inferiority also is part of interiority. So here we go. Unspoken Conversation by Iman Ukta Hameen, 2020. Our stories, like life, we all have one. Some we shout to the world, others we sequester. Women do this, leave theirs untold, tucked away, discarded, to hold dear for another time, her time. Unspoken Conversation is one such story. It takes form in the short film of a jazz musician's wife, Shanti, mother of two, who longs to return to college after realizing that film can be a medium to enhance her need to write, explore, be a contributor to her family, and become. Captured in an autobiographical black and white thesis film within 24 minutes, Iman Ukta Hameen, while an enthusiastic CCNY film student of her mentor, the late Professor Kathleen Collins, portrayed in scenes by history-making pre-Tyra Banks Star Search model, the first Star Search model, Tracy Ross, sketches her life in the context of a conversation to her husband, Ted. For it is not only her story after all. Within glimpses of her life as a jazz musician's wife, a mother, a helpmate, a daughter, and student, there is a sadness and a subtext where we find a man with traditional values and strength, demanding to provide for his family and care for his wife, an uncommon image of a jazz musician. The threat of that stability unearthed him. We also see wisps of other women's lives, the other jazz wives and so-called wives, her mother, dog-tired from years of caring for her own family, the professor's battle to become, and we hear a powerful musical score in rich original compositions by Hameen's husband, Jesse, lilting and haunting, raising its own voice as if the only character of the film. Traveling the same journey, it illustrates the film's theme that the pursuit of one's passion is life and possibly death. If looking closely, one can spot actress Joie Lee symbolically dressed as Shanti was in the opening voiceover. How the couple hurdles this crossroad becomes the simple plot with a seemingly simple end, like only in the movies, perhaps. I think that says it all.
It does. It does.
I think it says it all.
It is, and I want to use that to jump over to talk to Zora to kind of make a link there. Just I wrote down her time, and this kind of being able to portray what's around us, and yet to extend that into another kind of vision. So could you talk a bit, Zora, about how you got involved with filmmaking, and we'll talk a little bit about some of your films, descriptions of them, to get some more details about what we saw. Oh, you're muted.
So I've always been interested in the creative arts. And actually, speaking of, Aman was talking about writing, I can say my first job was as a writer. I made all of a dime or a nickel. We didn't, myself and my three brothers, we didn't get an allowance, but we could make money by either, myself and my younger brother, by either shining my father's shoes or writing a short story. Actually, it didn't seem so short to me as a child. And if he deemed it was worthy, and either option was fine with us. If he deemed our writing worthy, he would give us a nickel or a dime. So, and that was a really good experience because it started me off with writing at a very early age. My parents were very progressive, very artistic, as are many members of my family. And they encouraged us, particularly in the arts and the sciences. We even had homeschooling long before that became a concept. And I can say that I didn't really think about filmmaking as a career until I got to college. I've always been interested in photography, and that started in grade school. When I got to college, I thought of various things to major in, and I decided on film, having a great interest in the arts, and I sort of rationalized that you can make a film about anything. So that's kind of how I got started in film. And actually I had a double major, film and photography. So I had a pretty heavy course load. And I even thought of writing as a before I began filmmaking, I thought of writing as a poor person's film format. If you can't afford to put it on celluloid, you can always put it on paper. So that's how I got started in film and photography. Not in a little bit more than an amateur way. So not professional, but not totally amateurish either.
Yeah, I think it's even though your films came to us through the Great Migration Home Movie Project, and you were bringing home movies that were shot at Highland Beach, Maryland. And we were so, as we were scanning them, there were these terrific black and white films that were clearly not home movies, although they were shot in domestic spaces, but they fell into another realm, which would be the the terminology of conservation and archiving as amateur films, which encompasses, basically films that you're not being employed to make, or non-theatrical films. So these were very, very striking to see these films.
Right, because I don't think of them as home movies, even though they are. I use my family members as inspiration, but they are, I look at them and they were made as art projects.
I just wanted to finish part of what I was saying about what brought me to film. I knew I had a skill for writing, and there was a gap in my life between finishing college. After I left Howard, I was at Howard for 2 years, and I raised my family in between that time, I was in the Nation of Islam, converted to Islam. And I realized, I always knew I was going to go back to college. I took classes along the way at different universities, but I was ready to finish my degree. My children were older, and I didn't want just a writing degree. I wanted skills, tangible skills that I could come out with as well. And so I picked up a college catalog because I knew I was going back to college, and you learn so many things. I learned how to be DP, edit, load a camera, audio, so many skills, lighting, editing, all the technical skills that it takes to make a movie. So that was also a part of what brought me into film, that I wanted to go back. I wanted to finish my degree, go back to school, have a skill. And as I said in the small narrative, to be a contributing member of the family. Right. And be my own person as well.
And you felt that you could get that kind of expression through the filmmaking. And Zora, you also had kind of interesting trajectory in your work with film.
Right. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I can't say that I had Black role models per se. I've always been very interested in the arts, but I somewhat think of myself as a minor trailblazer because I've always liked to think outside of the box. So one thing that my dad instilled in us that was really a really good way to think is to not limit yourself, that we could be anything. And I really gave that some thought. And, he said, of course you can be, a doctor, a lawyer, Indian chief, a politician. And I questioned him. I said, well, how about president? He did not answer. and that was probably in the 50s. So, and lo and behold, Barack Obama, a man for his time. So I didn't know that I'd ever see that day. But as I said, I didn't really have Black role models. I knew about Gordon Parks and Oscar Micheaux, but I actually didn't know much about their work or other Black media artists. But I certainly became more aware of Black images on the screen. We actually weren't allowed to watch much television, and I didn't even start going to the movie theater until I was an adult. And I've probably seen a lot less films than a lot of people, which is kind of interesting. But what I did see on television, I did not particularly care for. Blacks were so marginalized and depicted as either thugs, drug dealers, especially as clowns. And we would even comment on that, myself and my brothers, certainly you could be a clown or a maid or something like that. Then in the 70s, the era of the Blaxploitation films, I definitely was not impressed with many of the Blaxploitation films and their negative portrayal of Blacks and the stereotypical image of Blacks. So, but that didn't necessarily sway me because again, I've always liked to think outside of the box. So in the films that I made, I can't say those films had much of an impression on me. However, I will say that I certainly was encouraged by seeing more Black faces in television and on the big screen. That was just wonderful. And I do remember that in 1968, Nichelle Nichols was cast as Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek. And that was somewhat groundbreaking in 1968. I was certainly impressed by that. And I'm sure I was impressed by many things that I don't necessarily recognize. I love the classic movies, the old classic movies. So I could list a few, but I don't want to take up too much time with that.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the one of the cinematographic, excuse me, exercises, the one where your mother and friends are doing the bump,
right,
in that room, in the room, and the different, and this was such a fun film. First of all, it's just lovely anyway to see their clothes, the interior space, the records, you know, that they're having so much fun. But also when we were scanning the film, it was really tricky to determine what was the right speed, what was going on, because there's these different changes of speed, which gives the film that kind of lively feel. And so this kind of experimentation that you're working with in using the camera was very striking for this film, and also as well for one of the two men behind the scenes. And also for Trip, actually, when you talk about Nichelle Nichols and the and sort of this kind of futuristic feel, that you have this kind of sci-fi sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Sci-fi is definitely one of my favorite genres. And the segments with the Carlton Smith and my mother doing the bump, as well as my brother Zeke and cousin Nick, that was just experimental cinematography. Same thing with, what else did you saw? Oh, the two performers backstage. That was Lionel Mark Smith, professional actor. He starred in Main and Market, Edmund, and a few other films and several TV series, Seinfeld, NYPD Blues, Hill Street Blues. He actually passed in 2008, but they had just finished their role on stage for the play Benito Sereno about a Spanish slave ship captain. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the footage. At times I collected footage, and I had a same thing with the bump. And I didn't necessarily have a specific idea in mind. At times I had a fairly concrete idea of what I wanted to do. Other times a partial idea of what I wanted to do. Other times not much of an idea. But the way I like to create is to have the process let the process speak to me. So if I have a partial idea as I'm working on the project, the work itself speaks to me. And to me, that's more of an organic way of creating. And that's how I like to work. So as far as doing the bump, that was Carlton Smith he's passed. He was a professional dancer, ballet, modern tap, jazz, and African dance, and great choreographer. He danced with Arthur Mitchell and Alvin Ailey. And he was like a brother to myself and my three brothers. And he even lived with us for a short while. And I took dance classes throughout grade school and high school, which was a wonderful experience. So I love it where he pretends to fall over. My mother knocks him over. I mean, he was just so good. I wish I could have filmed him in a professional capacity, dancing. So I think that's why I just settled on, at home with the two of them and the other family members doing the bump. And
Can I ask a question?
sure.
I wanted to know, it's a technical question for you, Zora. I was intrigued by your use of the camera, because I know the relationship with the DP is just crucial. Like with Kathy, with Ronald Gray, Kathy's DP, the framing, the work that he put into helping Kathy become a filmmaker. He pushed for Kathy to become a filmmaker. And then my DP as well, Shapur. I was watching the framing, the work that he put into Unspoken Conversation. But I wanted to ask you, how did you shoot? You superimposed images. Were you on a subway train or?
Yes, for Trip.
What did you do?
Both in Trip and Aerial, I've used a lot of double exposure, double, triple, quadruple exposure. So and I like doing that. And it was a way to produce special effects. In fact, I love the concept of making the ordinary extraordinary. And in a sense, that's what I did with Trip, or I'm Late, as well as Aerial and American Pie. So I'm going to remember that. But with Trip, it was really taking the mundane and making it extraordinary, because I lived a long way from the University of Illinois, Chicago, where I went to college. And it was about roughly an hour and a half long, one bus and 2 train rides. And generally fairly boring unless there was a fight or something on the L. So by filming and doing all the double and triple and possibly more exposures, it's making something boring more interesting. And I think the soundtrack makes a huge difference. So that was the thought with making Trip where I'm late, because I was always rushing, trying to get to my classes on time. So I think it's sort of a surreal sci-fi experience, not just a boring train ride.
16 millimeter.
Yes, black and white 16 millimeter.
Yeah, the other, these great films coming in, and in such great condition. But we have audience questions coming in. So I'm going to jump over to some of those. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but so do other people want to talk. So we have a question from a gentleman named Dennis Doros, and these questions are related to your experiences in film school. I wanted to ask Iman about her time studying film at CUNY and the influence of Kathleen Collins on her filmmaking. And what was it like to have an African-American woman professor as a role model at a time when there were so few in academia?
The film speaks to that as well when the professor walks in. The star quality of it, the fact that Tracy Ross, imagine Tyra Banks coming in. It was similar to that. Tyra Banks having that role and walking into the classroom. That was the effect it had on us. Just seeing her and getting to know her. And she was down to earth, just very personable, but very to herself. But she was about the business of film. And the impact for me was her bringing this out. When we submitted scripts to Kathy, she wanted us to take it seriously, not to have superficial storylines. I remember the script that I submitted about my life, which I thought the film was about, me being in high school and I was a cheerleader and all of this. And other people came back with just those kinds of films. And she was really angry. She was angry with each of us. Didn't say disappointed, but she expected us to go deeper. And that is what she did. And I did want to read a quote because this was Kathy's belief. Where did it go? Kathy felt that all our literature, theater, and film should reflect our humanity. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's what she demanded of us. So she took us through different processes. A lot of them I don't know to name, but she had us just go into ourselves. Just be quiet, close our eyes, listen to the voices that we heard. The first image, write it down. Similarly, we did that for a certain amount of, maybe 2 or 3 assignments. And we just watched our stories emerge. She wanted us to dig deeper, go into the interior of who we are. And that's what came out of this. I can hear her voice now telling me after I was relating what the story was about. She said, "You're having a conversation. You're really having a conversation with Jesse." And I don't think she said unspoken, but that's where the title came from, that it was an unspoken conversation. So that's the impact she had on us to dig deeper into who we are and to express that and to be honest about who we were. When I was watching the film, I said, "Oh my goodness, I really went in." I said, "That's Kathy. That's Kathy." We really went in and told the story.
But I also wanted to comment on the, there, for 24 minutes, there's so much content packed into that film. And it's just, it's really extraordinary, and it's so much emotion that it goes outside of the length of the film. I hope you're still there, Iman. Zora, a gentleman named William Saunders, asked, were there people of color or females in your class? Were there many at the university at that time? And in particular, did you have any role models for your work?
The U of I at Chicago Circle, there was also the Urbana campus in Southern Illinois, and U of I of Chicago, obviously. It was a very large university with roughly about 20,000 students or more in the 70s, and it was over 95% white. I believe there may have been one other Black, maybe two, in the College of Architecture and Art, which was incorporated the film studies program. So I did not, it was not a, I'm sorry.
Oh, continue.
Did you say something, Iman?
I didn't know why I disappeared, excuse me.
Okay.
So it was not a encouraging or nurturing environment, being a Black female. But I've been kind of used to that in school and even in doing environmental work. Oh, and Iman, you said, or Aina, you said that I worked for Audubon from 85 to 87. It was actually 85 to 97, 12 years.
Oops, I'm sorry.
12 years, because I did a lot of media work while I worked for Audubon, so I couldn't have done it in 2 years. That's why I just thought of that. So I did not have other people of color influences. And fortunately, though, to be such a white university, the assistant dean was Black and the associate dean of the College of Architecture and Art was Black, which was very unusual. And I got to know them both and became friends with both of them, and actually wound up marrying one of them, my first husband. So that certainly helped. But I can't say that I had much encouragement. And in fact, one of the things I can say is that I went to U of I for a year and then I dropped out. And U of I is a flunk out university. They expect half or whatever percentage of the students to flunk out. It's really tough. I did not flunk out, I dropped out. I went back a year later, and having dropped out and gone back, I had a much clearer focus of what I wanted to do and being serious about my studies and getting a degree. So it was actually, I think, a good experience to drop out and go back. And I didn't see any obvious inroads or avenues for filmmaking as a career, but I certainly could imagine that for photography. And for a couple of years after college, I did do freelance photography. So does that answer the question?
It does. And I wanted to kind of segue into the idea of influences and to some questions that are about womanhood and feminist kind of ideas in your films, because I wrote down Mother's Day, mothers and daughters all over, as I mentioned before. So a questioner asked, I'm sorry, yes?
Because I was cut off, I did want to mention, although there weren't that many Black filmmakers in my world, there were brilliant Black women in my life. And that helped shape me and make it through film school, because they were there for me, supporting me. And just to see Kathy, even though she was one, that had an impact. And right before we graduated, Ayoka came on staff, Ayoka Chinzira. Yes, and I was able to work with her later on a feature film as an apprentice, thanks to Ronald Gray, Kathy's DP.
Amazing, yeah.
But there were not that many opportunities once we left the building. There were not that many, and that's another reason why I didn't continue with film. Again, this was 30 some years ago, and the opportunities just were not there. Spike Lee was just starting. He just received his first budget. I think it was School Days was first, because he came to our class with She's Gotta Have It, and that's when I saw Joie on the screen, and I said, I gotta have her. But because she was filming with her brother, she wasn't able to take the part, but she did want the part of Shanti. So she agreed to be in the film. She was in the club scene. I had her in symbolically, and it, of course, took more than 2 hours. We were there all day, but just for that one scene, she had the white head wrap on, like Shanti did in the beginning, the white head wrap in the black dress, and she was in the jazz scene, in the jazz club. But there was an impact. I mean, things were happening for film, mainly for males. Even Warrington hadn't received his first big budget, and Reggie. But there were other images around at that time.
Right. Yeah, that's a rich vein to tap into.
There wasn't even cable. There was no cable. We had to wait till our junior year to just look at a VCR, 3/4 inch VCR. We couldn't even touch it until our junior year.
That it's how that technology works is all, and our access is really a long story. Yes, Dora?
Oh, I just wanted to mention, even though I didn't see a clear path to working in the film industry, and I actually did later move to LA and kind of worked around the edges in the film industry, but I've done a lot of film related work producing PSAs in my environmental career. But I wanted to say that while studying film, I feel that I was very fortunate to be able to study film and photography and to go to school full time. And even though I had work study, it still wasn't like having a full-time job in fact, a friend of mine who I've kept in touch with over the years, a very dear friend of mine, Portia Iverson, I even emailed her and said, do you remember anything from our film student days? Trying to scratch my head. It was almost 50 years ago. And she wrote me to say that all I can remember about film school for myself is that I absolutely had no plan, no vision of a future, AKA mainstream career, only the feeling of wanting to create in the moment. That and a tremendous desire to create and to learn. In a sense, this was a time of pure, unadulterated creative pursuit. And I couldn't have put it better. So I'm just very thankful I had that experience, and it certainly has paid off.
Well, we're coming up to 7 p.m. So I did want to ask, I did want to pull in 1 or 2 more questions if possible.
Sure.
One is, how do you think that the perspectives on motherhood and womanhood in the film can connect, and I would say to both of your works, can be used to connect with the current generation?
Well, my film has a universal message, and like someone said, it's timeless. So I think it connects with them. It would resonate with any generation. Is she asking how, do I think?
Yeah, I think just as, maybe what you're depicting in the films and how your resolution of it, how we might think about that now in resolving the same kinds of issues that are coming up. As you say, it's a universal situation.
I think they could use me as an example, not that they would know me, but I'm still married after 40 some years. The relationship is cemented and strong. There was two artists in love with their passion, but mainly in love with themselves. I left film because I wanted to raise my family. My family was my top priority, and that's what I did. So anyone who has that standard, they can learn from the film when they see it, and it probably will resonate with them in some way, and then they can live their life in that manner, if that's what they're looking for.
Mhm. I think that's really striking in your film, that this depiction, at that time, at that period where you would see these kind of pathological relationships between Black men and Black women, and that this is resolved, and that two artists end up working together. So it's a very, I think, not unusual, but it's a great resolution that we don't see enough. It has a great
Compromise.
Yeah.
It shows you that in relationships you compromise. You don't give up who you are, but you compromise and respect each other for who they are.
And I really, Zora, I wanted to ask you a little bit about using your mother in the film and seeing her, and how that that worked for you. I find it very moving, and the way that both of you have pictured mothers in the film.
Right. My mother and my cousin Melina Papademos, my mother Gladys Lathan, in American Pie, they were great subjects. They were very accommodating, very cooperative. And my mother was an exceptional cook. And Melina was very fond of her aunt, loved to watch her cook, and certainly loved to eat whatever she prepared. So that was kind of a not that difficult to come up with that subject matter and to make an animated film out of it. So took lots of photographs. And in fact, Melina was just so great when I said, Melina, show expressions of anticipation and eating the pie and surprise when you see the empty pie plate. And she was just right on it. And the same thing with, Ariel, when I work with Armin Jr. and the young girl who just fortuitously happened to be nearby.
Perfect performer.
Right, and yes, because she was perfect. At that age, 5, I love working with youngsters at that age, and I've worked with a lot of youngsters via my 35-year environmental career. They at age 5, you're uninhibited, just upbeat. I had an idea of what Armin was capable of being my nephew, that he was athletic and a happy child. But again, the young girl, I'm just meeting her. I said, hey, would you like to do a dance? And can I film you? And she just went for it. She was
That's such a sweet image.
Yeah, so joyful and right. It really is.
Oh, sorry.
So,
I just want to acknowledge 2 of my cast members. Cedric Turner, who played Ted. You may have recognized his face. He is Catfish. He calls himself Catfish. But you see him at the beginning of the Dave Chappelle show. He's the blues singer. Chappelle show. That's Cedric Turner. And then Allison Dean. She was in Coming to America. She was the sister of the love interest of Akeem, the character. She played the sister, and I just knew immediately when she walked in the talent. She's just a natural talent, Allison Dean. So I wanted to acknowledge those people.
So I'm going to ask one very brief question, which and get a very quick answer from you. We could go on all night, and so I wanted to have a question before we close from Kinshasa from Namak, and she asked, "What does it mean to each of you to have your work preserved in the National Museum of African American Culture collections, and do you see yourself as part of a lineage of African American women filmmakers and film history in general?" And that's a huge question to ask you to answer very shortly, but that would be our last question. So whoever would like to go first.
Yes. Thank you, Julie Dash. Thank you, Julie Dash. Thank you, Julie Dash. And Nima Barnett. Thank you, Charles Burnett. Thank you to all the filmmakers who came before us. Thank you, Jessie Maple. She was the first African-American female camera person in the industry. I don't know if she was with CBS but she also screened films in her brownstone in Harlem.
Yeah.
She would screen independent films.
And Zora?
So how do I answer this? What does it mean? I'm amazed. I'm thrilled. I'm honored that you found an interest in my films and that they will become part of the African American Museum or the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Is it NEMOC? Is that the acronym, NEMOC?
NEMOC, but
Okay, 'cause that's a mouthful.
The map.
So-
Yes,
So I'm really thrilled. And as I wouldn't say I see myself as part of a lineage of African American women filmmakers, because I haven't done anything that significant in terms of pure film. But I do believe I've influenced people. In fact, I certainly think I've influenced people via the PSAs that I produced. And again, I've worked with a lot of youngsters. I've done a lot of landscape designing. One of the best compliments I ever had in doing environmental work was the Chesapeake Ecology Center is based at a middle school for behaviorally challenged children. And once I happened to overhear a woman talking to another woman saying that her nephew went to the school, and he comes home and he talks about the butterfly garden and the rain garden and the forest buffer, and he's becoming so excited about learning in general. And what does that have to do with film? I've done short films and instructional films about some of these topics, and work with students sometimes on the short film. So I've sort of incorporated my schooling and my general work and other work that is definitely related, but it's not a film where I would even be credited like a PSA. You don't get credit, you know. So your name is not on the screen. But just to have it out there and to influence people on healthy eating practices, or to reuse, reduce, and recycle, or rainscaping, or rain gardens, you know, that sort of thing. It is certainly impactful and certainly makes a difference. So.
well, I'm going to.
I'll say we are part of the legacy. Oh,
Yes,
I just want to say
exactly.
we are part of the legacy, Zora, and we are considered fringe filmmakers. That's what they always termed
Okay. All right.
us when we were screening at Brooklyn Museum or wherever we were in the 80s, and I'm sure they knew about you. So you were in that category.
Exactly. I don't displace the amazing contribution that your film, Zora, and your film, Iman, have made. So they are part of a trajectory. And I think that that's our role at the museum and for a program like this, in order to put them in their correct place in the story of filmmaking.
Right, which I think.
And I'm hoping Ava comes out with a revised edition or part 2 of the first directory I made reference to, with the 89 female Black filmmakers, and we'll be in it, Zora.
Well, first of all, you're at the Museum of African American History and Culture and the
Yes.
Smithsonian Wide.
You put us in there, yes.
So,
Yes, thank you, Iman.
Thank you,
Ina,
Ina.
can I just say real quick that this is such a wonderful program, the Great Home Movie Film Project. Is that the right name?
Migration Home Movie.
Great
Project.
Migration Home Movie Project to document Black Americana. As a executive director of the Chesapeake Ecology Center, I would have to come up with ideas, programs, initiatives. This is such a wonderful initiative and idea and concept and reality. So it's a great program.
So, well,
People
thank
find
so
you.
much. Okay.
How can people find you easier? It's very difficult on the link to go to this initiative. Never mind.
Why are you asking that now? Thank you so much.
Thank you so
it's
much.
such a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for the American Women's History Initiative, and thanks so much for this event tonight. And we'll see you. It'll be recorded, and we'll see you for next time. So,
Okay.
Calling in, Dennis. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Ina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Ina.